honestly what I tell every single person like that is like, hey, if you're in a saturated market right now, why don't you pull a list that no one can buy? It's a list you have to earn. And I tell everyone Drying for Dollars, right? You cannot buy a Drying for Dollars list. You have to earn the Drying for Dollars list. And the coolest part about that is when you cold call a Drying for Dollars lead, the average deal per call is so much better than the average like regular list you have to pull. Like if I pull a vacant list versus a Drying for Dollars list, I'm probably 50% more efficient with a Drying for Dollars list because no one else is talking to that seller. It's an ugly house. It's fresh out of there. You just can't buy that lead. And it works really, really well. And you don't have to pull your hair calling 5 hours a day.
So really, really excited to welcome on today, Zach Ginn. I know you teach wholesaling for free all over the place. Like you've got freewholesaling.com. You put a ton of great knowledge there. You've got Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, pretty much every social media, covered, and you're putting out a ton of great free stuff there too. And then you've done over 1,000 deals yourself. So you truly know what you're talking about. It's really exciting to have you on, man. Thanks for the time.
Really appreciate it, man.
Can you tell us a little more on like how you got into real estate, your journey, how you did that first deal and start there?
Yeah, man. So my name's Zach Ginn. I've been pretty much wholesaling real estate for the past 5 years. So I got my first deal at 17 years old. I think a lot of people know my story, but my dad, Rick's been wholesaling for about 20 years now. And I kind of got started as a bag boy about 14 to 17 years old. And I didn't like it. Saw my dad was wholesaling, asked him how I can start wholesaling. And he told me just get a first couple deals first, and then he can kind of help me out, kind of school of hard knocks. So I did a lot of high school wrestling in high school. So basically what I did was I didn't have much money. So I spent pretty much all the money in my bank account on bandit signs. After my high school wrestling tournaments, I would just put We Buy Ugly houses outside those high school tournaments by their stop signs. And from there, I got my first pretty much bandit sign calls from my high school. And more or less, I kept getting kicked out of class answering bandit signs. And then one day I got one call, got kicked out of class for being on my phone. And then it was eventually led to a call where I wanted to go meet with somebody. They wanted to sell the property. And lo and behold, I went there and I got my first deal. It was about $25,000 assignment fee at 17. Got another deal, did about 20K on the second deal. And eventually I was at like 45K and I quit my bag boy job. And long story short, by the time I was 18 years old, I graduated high school. So like 8 months overall in the story, made about 100K. From there, scaled up, and now me and Rick do our business together, and we do over $100,000 a month in wholesaling real estate, and we teach everybody for free. So that's what I do.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I wrestled in high school too. It is extremely intense and the hardest sport I've played by far. Is there anything from you going through that you think you've carried into your real estate business? Like, do you think that set you up for success in any way?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the greatest people at any single sport out there, I mean, I did wrestling. I've done some combat sports, so that's something I really, really love. But I love other type of team sports. And really, when you look at any sport out there, the greatest person in any sport pretty much has always done the work consistently, and especially the hard work, right? So one thing I can relate in wrestling, right, is I sucked when I started. And the only way I got really good when I ended as a senior was I consistently went to practice every single day. And I consistently showed up every single day. Even when I didn't feel like I was getting better, I just showed up. And getting 1% better every day for 4+ years, complete transformation for me. And I kind of used that to my wholesaling, right? So I sucked starting out, but I kind of just went through it and I showed up every single day. I cold called every single day. So quick story, I just did virtual wholesaling in my dorm room, and I cold call 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year straight. And my knowledge of cold calling grew so crazy during that time. Like, just imagine doing something for 5 hours a day for like pretty much every single day. My skills cold calling just went insane, and my income jumped like crazy. So it's like, I love Kobe Bryant, I love Michael Jordan, LeBron, like all those people have put in the work every single day. Like, they don't take months off and they just show up every single day. And that's honestly what I found. So if you put in the work, you keep it up consistently, you're always going to get better. And I have personally never met one wholesaler that has done a deal and consistently doing deals that has not put in the work consistently. So I always say this: consistent action leads to consistent results, and that's how you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know we talk driving for dollars often over here too, and that, like you said, it's a numbers game. It's about consistency, and anything you're trying to achieve like that is absolutely key. So, do you? I know you're crazy young. You're 22. You said, right?
23. I just turned 23.
Okay. Hey, happy birthday. Yeah. For, I know we have plenty of people listening to this too that are, young, and maybe they're thinking about college. They don't know exactly what's the right path for them. I know that's something you speak on to your audience as well too. Do you have any advice there for people who are young and thinking about getting into the real estate game like this?
Yeah, it's all about taking action, So I started my YouTube channel as 19 years old. And one of the biggest reasons I'm even on this podcast right now is I actually talked to the founder of DealMachine, or co-founder, David Lecko,
Hey, David.
when I was 19. I was just starting out really. I was only doing cold calling. I was only doing bandit signs. And I started doing driving for dollars by myself, and I was doing really well. And I started this YouTube channel documenting like a 19-year-old kid doing $50,000 deals. And one thing I really took, because I interviewed him, and it got like 30 views or something, but it was insane. The biggest thing I took from him, and this is something I always use, and I always say to like young people talking, is like, I remember he said back then, and I feel like I'm an old man saying this, but like in 2019, 2018, he's like, I've seen every single person on this app. Usually when they get 400 leads, they always get a deal, like clockwork, right? Like if they get a certain amount of drawing for dollars leads, you can't like get 700 drawing for dollars leads and not get a deal if you like just do the basics, right? If you ask people if they want to sell their house on a drawing for dollars deal, and if you do at least 4 to 500, like back then was the number, it just works. And he had thousands of people on there, right? And that's the way I really like to talking to teenagers starting out. Like if you do a certain amount of leads, especially drawing for dollars, it's almost impossible not to get a deal. Like you really have to try hard to talk to these many leads and not get a deal. Like if you just simply convey, hey, I want to buy your house. Are you looking to sell it? If you do to a certain amount of drawing for dollars leads, you're always going to get a deal, like no matter what. And I think that's the one thing you got to look at it. It's a numbers game. And it's really cool because if you do the lists that work and you just consistently do it a certain amount, you're going to get a deal. The people that come to me and say drawing for dollars sucks or it doesn't work, they do like 50 leads. And I'm like, it takes 400 to get a deal. Like that, come on. So you always got to put in the work. And when you can quantify in your head how many it takes to get a deal, it makes it so much easier.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I know, that's something we're constantly talking about on our end as well. And whenever we're asking somebody who like, hey, how many leads have you put in? How often have you followed up? It all goes back to that consistency, like you said. But and I know you've wholesaled over 1,000 deals yourself at this point. What do you think? And obviously you're putting out a ton of free stuff as well, in terms of educating people and really helping them, follow your path that way. What do you think are really those keys to success outside of consistency that you see really separates the most successful wholesalers that you're teaching and helping out from the ones that don't land that first deal?
Well, it all comes down to action. Like I have never met somebody like I teach. I have hundreds of thousands of people learning wholesaling, and every single day I get 5 or 6 checks sent to me just from my wholesaling group of just like, hey, thank you. You changed my life so much, blah, 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 right? Like, and I just ask them simple questions. I've never met somebody, like I've said before, who's getting deals or got their first, second, third, fourth deal that did not consistently do marketing. And that always comes down to the key. You have to do the marketing. That's always going to be the net result. And the one thing I could say with consistent and successful wholesalers from ones that don't is they're just not consistently marketing, and they're not consistently doing the same thing every single day. Even when it's not fun, you always consistently put in the work. There's guys and gals that are they've wholesaled for 6 or 7 months and they haven't gotten a deal. And those people come to me and I do my one-on-one calls. I talk to them, and I can pretty much look at any wholesaler right now that hasn't done a deal, and I can ask them how much marketing they've done. And I can pretty much guess how much deals you've done. So like I've said before with what David said, if you're talking to me and you're saying you're doing 400 drawing for dollars leads every single month, and you've done it for 6 months straight and you haven't got a deal, it's going to be very hard for someone to prove that. And usually the person that comes to me and says they haven't gotten a deal in 6 months, they're just not doing enough marketing. And that's always the issue. And so that's only what I could say. And then confidence is another thing I could say too. Really when it comes down to talking to a seller, it's about confidence too. And a lot of successful wholesalers have that, and not a lot of non-successful wholesalers don't have that, right?
Yeah.
And confidence comes down to a belief in what you say and the way you convey your message of buying a property. So those are the 2 things I've seen.
Yeah. I know we've interviewed at this point. I know Elise has interviewed herself over 150 DealMachine customers who have landed deals using the app, and we just ask them like exactly what you said. Hey, what are you doing? Like, what break it down for us on how you did this? And it's always, hey, put in enough leads, they hit that tipping point where they're consistently doing that. They're actually taking action and marketing to those leads. They're reaching out to those sellers every single day. And then they're really staying top of mind by staying organized and knowing like, hey, I need to follow up now. I need to make a follow-up call. I need to make an offer. I need to go on an appointment. Like those 3 key elements are what we usually teach people of, hey, here's how to go out there and get that first deal and hundreds after that. So yeah, lines up with that. One thing I think you do a phenomenal job of is teaching kind of virtual driving for dollars. And that's something in just like virtual, I guess, investing in, in other markets virtually. And that's something that I know is growing for us, and people use the virtual driving for dollars feature with us pretty often. How do you go about like selecting a virtual market and that process? Can you talk about that if people want to get into that side of wholesaling?
Yeah, so I can always look at this, and I can always look at every virtual wholesaling done. I love virtual wholesaling. I could tell you this right now. So there is only one choke point I have found in virtual drawing for dollars, and I know you guys know a little more about drawing for dollars than me. I'll admit, but what I can tell you is the biggest choke point I have seen on virtual drawing for dollars is just the date on the Google Maps. And the coolest thing that I figured out is every single year, what I've done for pretty much 5 years straight is Google will literally show you every market they're driving for that year. So I've pulled up in 2022 where they're going, and I can see in every single state what markets they're updating new. And so I know next year I'm going to do that. And then there's like 40 or 50 metro markets to do every single year. And that's where you can do virtual drawing for dollars, right? I had Corey. He's one of our students, and he's doing phenomenal. He's doing over 100K a month. And he started hiring, I kind of helped him out, a VA to do virtual drawing for dollars in this market. And this is the exception to the rule, but like his Google Maps is from 2016, and he's still doing it and he's crushing it. So I'll tell you, the newer the Google Maps is better. But honestly, even the 2016 ones still work when you're paying someone $4 or $5 an hour. But for virtual markets, I've always found for someone going virtual, if you can have a population of the city of at least 40,000 and the average ARV below 300,000, that's going to give you the best chance of success. There are always exceptions to the rule, but overall, that's going to be the best. That's honestly what I've seen. So
yeah,
that's what I'd say about virtual.
That's a really good tip on the like looking at where Google's going to be driving, and like you said, I mean, in the top 40 to 50 markets, they're every single year going through and driving there. But I'd say that pro tip is a big one. Within DealMachine, you can actually see when the picture was taken, so you can know like is this a good market or not to be doing this in. The other one we'll really share too is you can check the last sold date on there, so that way you know like, hey, has this house changed hands since this picture was taken? And that way, is this an accurate picture? Is it the same owner that also owned it back this time when it was, run down? It will help you kind of really weed out the leads as well too. So awesome. So one thing you did touch on, you briefly mentioned your cold calling and how many reps you put in there and that you love it. That's one thing that you've done a really good job putting out content, as well as you'll do that live and show people the whole process of that. Can you break it down for our audience in terms of what makes you great at cold calling, some best practices there? I know that could be an entire hour dedicated to that, but maybe a couple nuggets would be great.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. Okay, so I did cold call 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year straight. And that I always say it takes a stupid person to do that, because I think it's idiotic to do that. Okay, and I did it. I was cold calling high equity leads all day, every day, like a madman. And that was because I was 19 years old and I was hungry to do deals, and I was actually virtually doing this. One thing I could tell you is that's just, you're going to go for the average person. I had such a big chip on my shoulder of doing deals at 19. The average person can't do it, right? Because I'm talking to people all over the country, right? Single moms, single dads, maybe have a full-time job. It makes no sense. And one thing I've changed the past couple of years that's really helped everyone learning from me succeed is I've simplified everything. So one thing I can tell you is, let's say you live in a market where it's really good for drawing for dollars, right? Or a virtual market, right? Think of what the average person is. And I do like saying the word guru. It is true, but the average real estate influencer, right? They're going to tell you, pull this list. They have a nice little affiliate link on it, and they tell you only to do that. And pretty much every wholesaler kind of does what they do, kind of like a herd mentality, and they do it. And then the average person does that, and then they get a call, and they're like, you're like the sixth person to call me. And you start cold calling, you get that all the time, you get really frustrated, and you're calling, you're not getting a deal. And honestly, what I tell every single person like that is like, hey, if you're in a saturated market right now, why don't you pull a list that no one can buy? It's a list you have to earn. And I tell everyone dry for dollars, right? You cannot buy a drying for dollars list. You have to earn the drying for dollars list. And the coolest part about that is when you cold call a drying for dollars lead, the average deal per call is so much better than the average like regular list you have to pull. Like if I pull a vacant list versus a drying for dollars list, I'm probably 50% more efficient with a drying for dollars list because no one else is talking to that seller. It's an ugly house, it's fresh out of there, and you just can't buy that lead. And it works really, really well. And you don't have to pull your hair calling 5 hours a day. So honestly, I have found people that dry for dollars during the week and they cold call like 2 or 3 hours on the weekend and they get a ton of deals and they're working a full-time job. And it doesn't make sense to cold call 30, 40 hours a week right now if you have a full-time job. And a lot of people, that's their biggest issue. But you could spend maybe 3, 4, 5 hours drying for dollars. You can listen to some of my content, listen to music, have fun while you're doing it. A lot of people think this marketing stuff is like hard grind work that sucks. And you can have fun while doing it, right? Listen to some new music, dry for dollars, look for ugly looking houses, and go out there and start calling them, right? The biggest secret to cold calling I've found right now is just cold calling lists that are efficient and good, right? Even if it's a probate, if it's a drying for dollars, it just lists that the average wholesaler isn't going after. It's just going to get a lot easier. And I always mention it. It's like going somewhere with a bike or a car. You can go the same distance, but a bike might take you 3 hours and a car might take you 30 minutes. You're doing the same work. Just do a more efficient vehicle.
Yep. Yep. And that's something we'll, when you say, hey, you have to earn that list, we'll talk about that and being like, hey, that's a list that, like you said, it's going to have way less competition, because it's, you earned it, no one else can easily pull that list. And then in addition to that, there, the number one indicator of somebody being in a position where they're looking to sell is physical distress. And that's what you're looking for with driving for dollars. So putting those two things together, like you said, make a pretty magical combination there. So, great. Well, one question I did have, I know, as it comes to kind of cold calling or really any conversation with sellers, we just came from a networking event that was talking about the gap in the market right now. And, some places this is more severe than others, in like a San Diego or a Phoenix or somewhere like that, it's going to be bigger than it would be even in a St. Louis where I am. But the gap being like what sellers think their property's worth and what it's actually worth, being, especially like I said, in a market that's, in the middle of a downturn currently. Do you have any tips on approaching that conversation with sellers or negotiating tips in general that, our audience can take to those conversations?
Yeah. And I'll be 100% straight up with everyone. There's people out here that tell you, go try to convince a seller to sell their house for less. And it's not about that, right? I'm not in the business of really being a salesperson or slick salesperson. And as someone that's 18, 19 years old, I always tell them, it's like, don't pretend to be something you're not. So I always go really simple. Someone, hey, I'm looking to buy your house. And I just go from there, right? If they think their house is worth $1 million, I go tell them to list the house. And 9 times out of 10, if it's a really good deal, every deal I've done that's over $50,000, they don't list their house. The house is in distress and they just want to get rid of it, right? But yeah, the one thing, if someone like wants too much of their house, I know there's a divide in the market sometimes. All they got to do is, and I'm kind of talking about this topic a little later, but it's kind of a Zestimate crash, right? People are obsessed with Zestimates lately, and they're seeing now their Zestimates falling, and that's changing a lot of sentiment in the market. And if you really study like 2006, 2007, history repeats itself, but it also rhymes. So history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And if you really study back then, what happened was people really didn't realize things were going bad until like a year or two after, really till Lehman Brothers kind of went down and then things kind of changed the sentiment of the market. But the one thing you can just see here is inventories going up. The properties are on the market a little more. It does take time for a lot of sellers to realize it. But if there is distress with the property and distress with the seller, they just want a quick cash offer for it. So we're still doing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 deals now. You just got to get to a more motivated list right now, and you can still make money. I think people still panic. If real estate goes down 3% a month for the next 2 years, yes, it's going to be bad. But as a wholesaler, we are not buying the property. We're not owning it. So it doesn't really affect me, right? You just do cash buyer and you sell it for a lesser price. But yeah, my biggest negotiating tips I've always done is I always lowball my sellers, and I even call it a lowball because it's just what a seller's willing to take. So I do a good cop, bad cop approach. It's a regular lowball. I try to get the price out first. And honestly, if they're not willing to sell it for cash, and if they want to list it, I tell them to go list it. But the people that are crazy on the prices, it's an interesting one. They always come back and turn around the future. But like, let's say you have a probate list and the person passed away and they just got to get rid of the house. They don't want to list it. They don't want to do the work. They just want to get rid of it for cash. And if you can find a seller like that, that's how you do it. But yeah,
Yeah.
if they want too much for it, they just go list the property.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you made a good point too. Of if you're wholesaling the property, you're dealing with the cash buyer on the other side, right? You're not holding on to it yourself. On that front, in this market, do you have any tips on really, finding cash buyers, dispo strategies, tips for newbies looking to solve that side of the marketplace too?
Yeah, I've personally found there's 5 ways to find a cash buyer, and that's a very broad term to say it. But for a lot of people out here, finding cash buyers is more important right now, especially when real estate goes down, than finding sellers, because sellers are going to be everywhere, right? But the finding cash buyers, my favorite place right now is still Facebook. And if you just go to Facebook groups and you just find cash buyers, a lot of them are on there. A cash buyer historically only do 2 things when they buy the property. They either flip it or they either rent it out. That's honestly what I found with cash buyers. Like, most of them are going to do that. So if they're going to flip it, you can go and find the cash sales and then just cold call them, right? The other thing you can do too with the landlords is if they're buying properties and renting them out, and statistically, even during the last crash, cash buyers, especially for rentals, have bought a property pretty much every single month during the entire crash, because you never know when a bottom truly is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a landlord and you buy a property, you rent it out, where are you going to go? You're going to go for the 4 rents. So if you cold call the owners of the 4 rents, you're going to hit the landlords, and they're probably going to buy more properties. And you as a wholesaler, you're selling contracts for a discount. So they're going to want to buy them better than an MLS deal. So they're going to be on the 4 rents also. And the next one here, realtors are really good. So if you actually find like houses that sold for cheap prices. So if your average house in St. Louis is selling for like 230, 250, but in St. Louis, there's houses selling for 40, 50, 60K, some of those cash cow type things, a lot of the Section 8 houses. Go look at the properties that sold for 60K in St. Louis and find the buyer's agent, and then call the buyer's agent, and they got a ton of people looking for Section 8 rentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of rental podcasts out there. The last thing I could tell you is realtors are great, networking, JV, great, but the last one, and this is a big tip I give to you, is the local auctions. And what I get to say, if I live in St. Louis right now and I have to find a cash buyer for my deal, every single month there are going to be auctions. There's going to be private auctions and there's going to be public auctions, right? So if there's a tax deed auction right now for people that are not paying their taxes and the government auctions it off, find the buyer of those properties and then call them up. And then there's in-person auctions, and for like private auctioneer services will auction off a property. There's going to be about 20 or 30 people bidding on that house there. All those people are qualified to buy properties, and only one person's going to win, which means there's 29 other cash buyers there that are sad they couldn't buy a property for cash. Make them happy, give them your card or something, and then go use them as a cash buyer. There's realtors at those auctions. It's insane.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to find cash buyers.
It's a great tip. Yeah, I know within DealMachine, we do have a filter that owns multiple properties. So you can filter that out and contact people that way in your local market. But yeah, those are all super, super helpful, man. One thing before we got on here, you were telling me a little bit about, reverse driving for dollars and, that method. Can you maybe share that tip with our audience too, since it's so timely and working extremely well?
Yeah, it's crazy too. But this is another tip I give to you, that even for like a DealMachine customer watching this, right? And I don't care if you watch me, never watch me again. I do tell anyone that does drawing for dollars just to test this out. And I'm not even saying because I think it's going to change your life or anything, but I just want you to test it out. Because this one thing, if you do it, could change your entire profits for drawing for dollars. Now, I've told everyone to drive for dollars forever, because the average wholesaler is listening to somebody that's telling them just to pull a list and then cold call it kind of like a robot. And everyone's doing the same thing and they're getting frustrated. Said, okay, you know what? Let's do a list that you have to earn, drawing for dollars. And that works really well. The problem is, if you're in a bigger market, someone might drive for dollars that list 2 or 3 times. And the coolest part about this is if you can do a new marketing channel, right, where it's like drawing for dollars and you're sending direct mail out. And that's the bread and butter of the best type of way to reach out to a drawing for dollars lead, right? You find the postcard, you find a deal, you send a postcard, you call it. That's really good, right? Not a lot of people can afford right now, with the price of postcards just going up like crazy. They can't send 1,000 postcards out for all the drawing for dollars leads. But what they can do is spend an extra cent on a sticky note. And what I've basically found from there is this actually works better than a postcard, because the average postcard, I don't know for your postcard statistically,
Mhm.
but the average postcard is about 1 to 3%, like at most, like maxing out. You do a bunch of direct mail, and the average sticky note is about 40 to 50%, which is 40% more effective than direct mail. And the average cold calling, you get a contact around 10, 15, 20% on a dialer on a contact rate, which means if I call 100 leads, I'm going to get 20 hellos. And when I talk to those 20 hellos, I'm going to say, hey, you're looking to sell your property, right? When you go and drawing for dollars, just get a wad of yellow sticky notes and write something like, hey, this is Zach. I have a quick question about your property. Please give me a call back. That's really interesting. Like, Matt, if I went to your house right now and it has a sticky note that says, hey, this is Zach. I had a quick question. Please call me. You're going to be like, who is this?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it an old friend? Did this guy hit my mailbox? What's going on? You're going to call it. And that gets a ton of interest, right? And it's really cool because you're going to get a 40 to 50% of people are going to call you back, which means you're getting 20 to 25 more yeses or 20 to 25 more hellos than the average drawing for dollars person that's cold calling a list, which means you're probably doubling your marketing effectively. And it works amazing. And the best part about this is the sexiest thing in real estate right now is leads that come to you, right? I don't have to go cold call. The leads come to me, which means when I drive for dollars, my marketing's done for the day. I don't have to cold call that list. I don't have to pay for skip tracing. I literally put 200 sticky notes out there, and now the leads are going to call me, which is so much better because not a lot of people, I love cold calling, but some people just don't like cold calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to go answer 100 leads in than cold calling 200 or 300 out. So it's really effective. You get pretty much a hold of twice as many sellers as the average drawing for dollars person. And overall, it's insane.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, we see people, they'll go out and they'll, like you said, they'll drive for dollars. If you put a sticky note on the door, you can easily tag that inside a DealMachine as a sticky note. We even have a drive a list feature. So if you have a list or if you filter out a list, using our list builder and then just hit drive this list, if you have that unlocked inside DealMachine, then it can GPS guide you to every single property on there and you can leave those sticky notes that way. So I love that tip, man.
It's amazing.
Yeah, love it. One other last question I had, I know there are a lot of people watching this that they're trying to debate, like, is now a good time to get into real estate? Like, is now the right time to make the jump, make the leap like that? For anyone like that who's, thinking about getting into this, what's kind of the advice you have for them on, is this a, quote unquote good time to be in real estate like that?
Yeah. So this is always funny. So I always have this book on my bookshelf, How Real Estate Fortunes Are Made by George Bockel. This is a book from 1972 about real estate investing, subject twos, wholesaling, flipping. Look how old this book is. 1972, 1973. I got this from a flip I did. Okay. This guy's been wholesaling since the 70s. And he wrote this in the 70s when he was an old man. Okay. Since he's been wholesaling since the 30s. Real estate wholesaling industry has been this thing pretty much since the 1910s. And if you just imagine how many crashes have been, you had the crash in the 70s, you had the stock market crash in the 20s, you had the 40s, 50s, you had World War II, World War I, the 70s, the 85 Wall Street crash, 2000 dot-com bubble, 2009. Like, you've had all these crazy things that are going to end the real estate, right? It's time and tested, right? So the only thing I can tell you is what happened last crash with Rick. I mean, he made more money wholesaling in 2010, 2011 than he did ever before then, right? And the coolest part about wholesaling is there's two times to wholesale, the best times, right? The best time to wholesale real estate was 10 years ago, and the second best time to wholesale real estate's right now. So that's the way you really got to look at it. So right now is going to be probably the best time ever because, yes, theoretically you think the world's going to end, right? The real estate might go, if real estate goes down 50%, let's say, you're going to make more money as a wholesaler than ever because in wholesaling real estate, you do not own the real estate, which is perfect because you find a cash buyer and you sell that to them, right? And I think a lot of people get this confused that we're owning the real estate and we lose 50% of the equity in our house. We don't, right? So real estate will go down historically at, let's say, the most insane rate possible is 5% a month. And that cannot be sustained. That's insane, right? At 5% a month, overall, that's not going to change much, right? And so if real estate goes from 100K for a house, now it's worth 92, 93,000, your cash buyer is still going to buy it at 5% less than it regularly is. So just get a lower price and then sell it. The coolest part about this is you're going to have more distressed properties than ever, which means you might do less deal. You might make less per deal, but you're going to do more deals than ever. And you kind of look at that equation. You're going to make more money during a crash. And it's amazing, guys. This book's since the 70s. Real estate ain't going everywhere. Wholesaling is the key. That's all you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. That's one thing we talk about often too. Is like you said, there's gonna be more distress, and the wholesaler's job is to find distress and to solve that problem for them. So you're gonna have more opportunities. But awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Zach. This was fantastic. I know you put out. I mean, freewholesaling.com is a great place to go. You've got great content on social media. Are there any other places people should connect with you?
No, just go to freewholesaling.com if you want to learn wholesaling for free. You don't have to, right? But just trying to help as many people learn wholesaling real estate for free.
Zach, really enjoyed the conversation, man. Thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, to everyone watching, this is Matt Kamp at DealMachine, and happy deal finding.